Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Marian White, and with me is my co-host of Larchmont Today since 1991, Ken Bialo.
Good evening, Marian.
Ken and I started the show in 1991 when we were both elected to be trustees on the Larchmont Village Board. And I served 4 years, you served 11, and then went on to be mayor in the village of Larchmont for 4 years.
Yes, I did.
So you have a lot of wisdom reposing in your brain. Well, I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving.
And you as well.
And what I love about this time of year, and I know you do too, is that children that live afar come for Thanksgiving, and then 3 weeks later they're back for Christmas.
Yes.
So this is
did
very
Andrew,
good.
Did Andrew come in from Dallas?
Yes, and he had no problems traveling, and he'll be back in about 2 weeks.
There
so,
you are.
Yes.
You have to pony up the presents at that time.
Well, that's a problem. Except it
Good
isn't a
stuff,
problem because people in their 20s all need cash, right?
Yeah.
Who doesn't?
Cash and iTunes and iPods and TVs and I don't know what else.
Things from the Apple Store.
Yeah, so,
Well, I hope you have a wonderful time with your family.
we will, and I hope you do as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You know, I had a mystery piece of mail since our last show, and you are the person that knows most everything, so I thought I would bring it because I think everyone in the village probably received one of these.
Yes.
And
This isn't the postcard from Susie Oppenheimer in Alaska that pretended to come from Susie, is it? It's not that one, is it?
No, that got a lot of attention, didn't it?
Yes, from the campaign practices
Yes.
committee.
I guess that won't be done again.
Oh, certainly not by the candidate who sent it.
This is from Westchester Government, the Department of Environmental Facilities, and it says it's a legal notice.
Right.
And, you know, I've read a bunch of legal garbled stuff in my lifetime and usually can figure it out if it's at all clear, but I really couldn't figure this out at all.
This is a personal mailing because it's addressed to you as resident.
Yes,
That's very
Ms.
personal.
Resident.
Ms. Resident. And this is telling you that there's going to be a hearing that must be held, and let's see, a public hearing on this financing plan will be conducted by the board at a time and place which, when determined, will be published in the Journal News. That's sort of an interesting postcard. This is a postcard that tells you and everybody else in the Mamaroneck and the Blind Brook and the New Rochelle and the Portchester sanitary sewer districts that there is going to be a hearing about the financing of a project that is being required by the feds and by the state Department of Environmental Conservation for pulling more nitrogen out of the effluent that goes into the Long Island Sound.
Okay.
And it's estimated maximum amount of $234,700,000.
For
Which will
just
be
a small group of people?
Which will be paid.
That's
That's
not a
right.
large group of people,
That's not
is
paid
it?
by the county. It's paid by the people who are in these 4 sewer districts.
Oh, wow.
So Portchester is Portchester, and I think part of Rye. New Rochelle is Larchmont, and part of the town of Mamaroneck, and also Pelham. Mamaroneck Valley is mostly the town of Mamaroneck, but I've forgotten who else, and the village of Mamaroneck. I forgot who else is in there. And Blind Brook is up, I guess, Harrison, Purchase.
So would that be maybe
Rybrook,
100,000 people?
It could be a little
Or
more.
household, I guess, is what matters.
Yeah, it could be a little more. But the point is
It's a lot of money.
that the cost of this is going to be borne by the sewer districts and not borne by the county at large,
Okay.
or by the state or by the feds. It's going to be charged to us. We are going to collectively pay for $235 million improvement in the quality of the effluent to reduce the nitrogen
And
in
we
flowing
have
to
to do
Long Island
this?
Discharge, Long Island Sound. Yeah, this is apparently being imposed by the feds through the vehicle of the New York State DEC. And when they say the estimated maximum amount of $234 million, what they really mean is somebody told them that it's going to be $234 million. And when they get the bids in and then make the changes in the plans and do everything in the way that municipal government typically operates, it won't be $234 million, it'll be $400 million. A good rule of thumb is 50 to 70% cost overrun in any project is perfectly fair.
Well, what I really love from your explanation, that this is my legal notice.
Yes.
There is no date set.
Right.
And there's also no date set for looking for when the date will be set.
Exactly right.
So there's no way that I will ever be able to attend the hearing.
Well,
in all likelihood.
unless you're prescient, yes. This is, I mean, of the things that the County of Westchester does for us, this is one of the more idiotic, in my opinion. To send a notice saying boy, there's going to be a hearing, but we don't know when it's going to be. We don't know where it's going to be. And if you keep your eyes on the Journal News, someday you may figure out where we had the hearing after you found out that we actually had the hearing. It's awful.
That's sort of confusing, I must say.
It's really, it really is idiotic. But I think if they could have written sort of, instead of having all these, I don't know, you can't see this out there, and I know I'm not supposed to use exhibits unless we tell Dina in advance. But what you can see is very small type here, and actually what they could have put on here are just a couple of very large words which go like this: your sewer taxes are going up through the roof. And that would have been a fine notice.
Well, who do we pay our sewer taxes to?
The sewer district, which is operated by the county.
So you mean the money that we pay to the county, part of that is sewer?
Yes, when you get your April tax bill,
okay.
All right, it comes from the county. It covers the county taxes, it covers the sewer taxes, it covers judicial taxes, that is tax money that's used to operate the court system. And there's one other in there, and I've forgotten what it is. But if you look at the notice, it will show you that there are 4 different taxing entities, if you will, that are consolidated into this one bill that they send you for whatever.
Well, then when they talk about county taxes going up, we're going to talk about that later, but when they talk about county taxes going up, do they include that this is going to be part of it?
I doubt it. It's a shell game, particularly from White Plains. It's a shell game. We operate lots of different districts and things.
Right.
And we can raise the taxes over there, but we won't say anything about that. We'll just talk about county taxes. Well, that isn't a county tax, that's a sewer district tax.
I see. So when they talk about county, they just mean that.
Well, unless you know for sure that when they're saying something that they mean to exclude those districts or include the districts, you can't know what they're talking about. That's the point. And the newspapers are about as sophisticated as your shoe. All they can,
sophisticated shoes.
All they can do is say the county board approves a 1.77% tax hike. And then they give you a couple of quotes from different people saying, I like it, I don't like it, I like it, I don't like it. But they don't really indicate, the newspaper
So we don't know if that includes this at all.
The newspaper does not indicate to you what this really means. Because I doubt seriously whether they have anybody on their staff who has read the county budget, or if they have read it, can really understand it.
Well, and it doesn't apply to the total county, it just applies to the sewer districts, which are part of the county.
That's the county. This is 4 sewer districts.
Right.
So it would surprise me if the county was including in their budget what was special to these 4 sewer districts when they're reporting things to the newspapers like a 1.77% tax increase. $235 million or $400 million, whatever this comes out to be, it's going to be a lot more than a 1.77% increase in your sewer taxes.
Well, would they collect it over 30 years, or does it have to be collected
quickly?
Well,
it probably depends on what they can borrow this at, and for how long.
Not a good time to be borrowing, I would say.
Not a great time to be in the credit market, no.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we hope that
there's
one
no
gets
date.
put off.
There's no date.
Oh,
and if you'll just keep reading the Journal News, just keep buying it and
maybe
reading
it's
it.
the Journal News that paid for this.
No, that would be original. That'd be like Illinois.
I'm from Illinois, and it is amazing.
We're referring now to the fact that the governor was arrested this morning for corruption.
Well, the
Something
corruption
that's very
part is
surprising.
not astonishing. Having a governor actually be arrested is really astonishing.
At 6
I must
o'clock
say.
in the morning.
Yeah.
And his chief of staff at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Well,
life is.
Life is tough in Chicago and Springfield.
I know one of the big, we've talked a lot about Flint Park over the years because, of course, it's one of your favorite places since you were a little boy.
Yes, was.
And I understand that an issue came up that the village, Larchmont Village, actually didn't have all the permits that were required. This was something that came out recently from a report in the Sound in Town.
Right.
What's behind that?
I don't know. You read it.
Oh, okay.
I think you remember in the fall of '07, the village board in the village of Larchmont approved, here's the rest of that article,
Oh, thank you.
approved the creation, I should say, the destruction of, if you will, my plan, or my board's plan for Flint Park, and the creation of an artificial turf playing field where there used to be tennis courts and where there used to be woods and trees.
Beautiful trees.
Yes, lots of big old trees. And so they mowed everything down, and they put this artificial turf playing field in there. You may remember that about the time, I think it was maybe October, perhaps it was September of 2007, there was a report put out by a study group in Connecticut, a laboratory in Connecticut.
Yes, yes. You unearthed the report.
I heard about it on CBS radio and went to the website and found all kinds of stuff. I mean, that's not, you don't ordinarily find me on the website. But it was carried by CBS radio, and it was a report of a study that said that there was potential for toxic chemicals to be given off by the rubber crumbs that are used to fill in these artificial turf fields. And so on this program, and then in front of the village board, there was a lot of controversy about whether these kinds of fields were safe or not. And this group from Connecticut had run some tests, and then there was somebody had introduced a bill in the New York State Legislature to put a moratorium on these kinds of fields. And
Wasn't there some sports group?
Oh, there were whole bunches of things that were happening.
I mean, there were just a lot of questions being raised.
Yeah, and it was a sort of a headline article in the Sunday New York Times.
Yeah.
It was all over the map. And some of the active people in the environmental community brought down the scientists who had run these tests to talk to the Village of Larchmont board before they approved this artificial turf playing field. I guess it was the October meetings, or maybe it was the November of '07 meetings. And you may remember that, and the Sound and Town carried this, and that the person got up to speak and was introduced to the board and then was summarily dismissed by the board, shouted down, so to speak, and not allowed to speak.
I didn't realize the scientists?
Yes, the scientists.
Oh, I didn't remember that part.
Well, the
That's
village board in
terrible.
Larchmont in the last couple of years doesn't like anybody to say anything that they disagree with, and they're prepared to squelch or get up and walk out while you're talking, or whatever makes them happy. Anyway, this fellow, Dr. Brown, had a report, and it created a big stir. And there was movement in Connecticut state government and New York state government. There were lots of studies that were going out. And then the NFL Players Association finally got the Consumer Product Safety Commission to look at the fields that 15 years ago the CPSC had rejected looking at, and now all of a sudden was looking at because there were a lot of players who were complaining about it. Big brouhaha, still brewing, apparently, because there was a seminar up in Rye, which we can get to in a minute, given by let me see, the Grassroots Environmental Education and Nonprofit Organization, and this had a lot of not so pleasant things to report to people who are interested in learning about the real costs and the real dangers of these fields. But this was about getting back to Flint Park. That article was about the village board in Larchmont approving and going ahead with the plan to do all these things in Flint Park. And I guess it's November meeting. Where they said they had all the permits that were necessary to go ahead and do this. And lo and behold, it turned out, and I think we talked about this on this program back in May and June during the political campaign, it turns out that the mayor and the village board did not have the permits. And they were required to have a permit, and they were apparently told by the DEC, state DEC, you have to have a particular kind of permit in August.
Right.
Didn't get the permit, according to this article, and then went ahead in November and approved the project and started the construction work.
As fast as possible.
Yeah. And then they got a letter in January, which of course they didn't tell anybody about, which said, stop work. You don't have the permits.
So someone monitors.
Well, somebody, I don't know, maybe it was the DEC who actually kept their eyes on the ball. So I don't know
It's
what.
good if someone's monitoring.
Yeah, well, I agree.
Things, yeah.
I agree. So apparently there was, I don't know whether there was a stop work or not, but apparently they went ahead and then got the permits. And somebody in the environmental community determined to ask either the newspapers or ask the village board whether they stood behind their statement that all the permits that were necessary had been obtained as of the time that they voted and started work. And they said, yes. They said they found out later there had been a change in DEC policy, and so that's why they thought they could proceed without a particular kind of permit. Well, it turns out from the newspaper article that they had been told in August by the DEC, that is 2 months earlier, that they needed that specific kind of permit, and so there was no change in policy, which is what the article reports. So the upshot of the article is the controversy about the Flint Park artificial turf field, which was scientific, and it was really a scientific discussion, it now turns out was one of those things where the local government, the Larchmont Village Mayor and Village Board, just fudged the whole thing and just went ahead without having a permit that they were supposed to have had and were told by the DEC that they were supposed to have.
And this really wasn't public information.
I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean,
it appears
yeah,
not to be. I mean,
right.
it appears like the news, as though the Sound in Town kind of unearthed it and got these comments from the people over at Village Hall, which just turned out to be bogus.
Well, I mean, you know, it's the fact that it sounds like they were rushing. Why don't you talk about the seminar, because that took place recently by many concerned people.
The Flint Park story is near to my heart.
Okay.
And yours,
yes.
I'm sure, as well, as residents of the village who would like to see things in the village.
Well, have taken babies
Yeah,
over there to
yeah.
play
run,
and watch
run
kids.
well. Yeah. Would like to see the things
Yeah.
in the village run well and honestly. That's a different issue than the
Right.
general subject of artificial turf fields. And the Mamaroneck School District Board is apparently putting up a bond to be voted on in February, which is
Yes.
going to include not only the work that apparently is must be done,
Right.
boiler repair, I guess, in hammocks, and some other supposed must-be-dones, although it does seem like they come at you about every other year with a $50 million bond. But they've also included in that some millions, I don't know, 8 or 10 million, for artificial turf fields, surprise, surprise, at various of the elementary schools and the high school.
And it includes Chatsworth as one of the
I think it does.
schools.
Yes, and I have a
Okay.
child in Chatsworth. And your children went through Chatsworth.
Oh,
All
yeah.
of my children went through Chatsworth.
Right.
My last one is in 4th grade. In any event, there was this seminar. And so this group, Grassroots Environmental Education, a nonprofit organization based across Long Island Sound at Port Washington, with an office at Wainwright House in Rye,
Okay.
gave the seminar. And you can say what they said, but the group, the speakers, seemed to affirm two things. One, the fields are more dangerous scientifically than people are willing to admit. And two, the costs are higher than people are willing to admit or discuss.
And you were saying that the costs were higher because the fields rip?
Well, here's what they were talking about here is all three speakers debunked the belief that synthetic turf fields save money by eliminating the need for fertilizing, mowing, and watering. First point, it has to be kept from being, the infill has to be raked and vacuumed and cleaned to remove debris, and
Okay.
also watered to control surface temperature. So you think you're getting a carpet that you're never going to have to touch. That's the image, the vision
Right.
that these fields people talk about, but the reality is there's a lot of work to be done all the time.
Well,
And
it
that-
must be harder. I think of grass as, bendable and, sort of easy to work with. But this is rigid, right? The
well,
turf?
it's more like, let's see, what are those Christmas trees that have the more
okay.
rigid needles?
Okay,
There's the balsam fir, which is soft needles, and then there's the other kind that's a little,
it hurts.
yeah, exactly right, pokey, they're pokey.
So that's just harder to work with.
So there's one thing, compacted
Okay.
vacuum to remove debris, water to control surface temperature. The seams split within 3 years and need to be repaired, and as much as 50% of the infill needs to be replaced within 5 years. And there are disposal costs associated with the end of the turf's useful life, which may be 10 or 12 years out, can be as high as $100,000, not to mention the $1 million that it costs to replace it. Remember in Rye and Bronxville during the floods a couple of years ago,
Yes.
the high school fields got
April
flooded.
of
They had to
05.
April of 05. They had to
Yeah.
tear up the fields.
It was a new field in
Yep.
Bronxville.
Yep, they had to tear them up and put new ones back, put new ones in, and it was about $1 million each.
Right.
So I guess the point on costs is it isn't cost free. And I guess the point on environmental consequences. Now, the EHHI study, the people from New Haven, Connecticut, had concluded that there were some volatile organic chemicals, which are the kinds of things you get from petroleum products, that were released when the rubber crumbs got chewed up. And that those things reached bad levels, and because the temperatures on these fields are so severely elevated, I mean, natural grass absorbs heat and absorbs carbon dioxide and gives you back oxygen. Well, this stuff is like cement. It captures heat and it holds it, and then it rises, and you can see when the kids are playing. If you go down on the field, stand along the sidelines when the kids are playing soccer, Matthew was playing travel soccer up until this year, you go down to the sideline where they have these fields, and the difference between the stands, which might be 90 degrees in late spring, and the field, which might be 150 degrees, is so remarkable. And the kids are running around in this. It is so, it's obvious to you. You just walk over there, you walk 20 feet, and it's like walking into an oven. Well,
and they're playing in
they're playing all, that's part of the danger of the thing. But anyway, these guys at Connecticut thought that there were petroleum-like organic compounds that were being released into the air that the kids were breathing and had certain adverse qualities. And more importantly, we're concerned that the proper testing be done before these things were approved.
Well, especially there's so many young people with asthma nowadays. I mean, that would just be terrible to have them breathing things like that, I would think.
Well, I think that's probably right. So now, these folks in Rye, the GEE group, highlighted a few more items, which is lead in the coloring, flakes of which can be accidentally inhaled or ingested, turf burns, MRSA infections, which are more common in artificial turf, and chemicals and metals that are released into the water. And then, of course, there's the loss of the natural grass and replacement by this sort of cement and rubber turf, which contributes to warming. Instead of cooling, it contributes to warming. Well, you know, we can all argue about whether humans really contribute enough to warming, to global climate change to actually have an effect. But for those people who believe it does, this adds as opposed to subtracting. Exactly.
Well, it's wonderful that they're, you know, continuing to look into this. Is there any other? Is this going to continue in some
Arsenic,
way?
acetone, phthalate, and other chemicals have been found in synthetic turf. Many exceed the New York State brownfield levels. Isn't that amazing? What they're saying is these fields have certain kinds of chemicals that are found in brownfields, which are the environmentally degraded areas around the state from chemical contaminants and other things.
You're kidding.
And that the levels on these playing fields, for some of the chemicals, not all, obviously, are actually higher than they are than are allowed at the brownfield sites.
And this is where children are.
This is what people are paying to install.
Yeah. Well, I don't know why people can't slow down a little bit and, you know, figure out what's safe.
Well,
especially when you're talking about young children, as at Chatsworth.
Well, here, and just to pick up on that very point that you make, here apparently the leader of the group said in some, what was recommended was the precautionary principle, which is when an activity raises threats of harm to human health or the environment, precautionary measures should be taken even if some cause and effect relationships are not fully established. I think the point is, go slow, be careful, particularly when you're investing huge amounts of money in things that may actually be counterproductive.
Well, and have long-term harmful effects.
Yes. Well, and I mean, nobody knows what the effects are on children. I mean, that's one of the points in the article is the effects of these chemicals and these other aspects of artificial turf fields on children have not been studied. We all know that there are lots of things that scientifically affect children differently than they affect adults because their systems are growing and kind of coming into place, and ours are more or less in place and stabilized, if not degrading.
Well, and the thing is at Flint Park, at least that's for middle school and high school age children. At Chatsworth, where you've got kindergartners, I mean, I just wouldn't think that you would want to do that.
Well, I have a child in Chatsworth who's going to middle school and then presumably high school, and I don't want him around there at all.
Well, I'm just so glad that you picked up on this story in the beginning, and that now it is getting
more attention.
Yes, so that's good. Speaking of things that get me worked up, we just have about 2 minutes, but I read on the Larchmont Gazette, it said for the town of Mamaroneck, the preliminary budget would be a tax increase of 2.4% for town residents. And then I go down, I mean, that sounds good.
Zero is better. But
zero is better. And it says properties in the villages of Larchmont and Mamaroneck, because we actually pay tax to the town, will see an increase in their portion of the town tax. It's an increase for the first time in 4 years. The percentage increase is 40%.
40.
40, absolutely. And then they say, oh, but this isn't much. For the average assessment of $20,000, the increase is only $81. Mm-hmm. I mean, who's to say that $81 is or isn't? I mean, who even knows if you have an average house? It's just astonishing to go up by 40%.
It does seem like a lot. Everybody else is trying to stay close to zero or zero.
Well, and I remember when we were on the board, we instituted having a representative from Larchmont go to the budget process and be our voice and our advocate to see what was happening there. And I'm not sure that's being done anymore.
Well, we actually had a committee that was looking over what the town was doing in relation to the increases that the town was imposing on the village of Larchmont. We pay taxes to the village of Larchmont, and the people in Mamaroneck pay taxes to the village of Mamaroneck.
Right.
That's for the primary services. But there is a little bit of tax that you pay to the town of Mamaroneck, which collects most of its money from the unincorporated area. And it was that little bit that was becoming troubling, and this was way back in the early 90s. And I remember people particularly in the establishment, got very angry that people in the village should be concerned about what their portion of the town tax was, but we were concerned and said,
yes.
5% is too much. 40% is on the high side.
I think people that pay taxes ought to be represented. So.
Fair point.
Well, I want to wish you and your family a wonderful holiday season.
And same to you.
And a Happy New Year.
And same to you.
And some good skiing.
Yes, hopefully.
And we are so lucky to have this wonderful group that helps us, LMC-TV, Dina Schumacher, who makes things work, and Lisa and Austin Kehrle, who do a wonderful job.
Did everybody hear the roar from the back room there? And John
Baldwin.
And
Missy. And we're honored that so many of the people that help us have been volunteers been honored as volunteers for LMC-TV. So,
they certainly are. They're a great group.
Thank you, guys. We couldn't do it without you.
Happy holidays. Happy New Year to all.
Take care.
And we'll see you next time.
See you in the new year.
Okay.